to Ecom Insiders Podcast. My name is Debbie, and this event is sponsored by SPCTEK. Today, we're going to be talking about strategies for scaling Amazon business while maintaining cash flow. And my guest is Oz Merchant. He is CEO of ecomsellersHQ, a platform to bring together the fragmented e-commerce ecosystem under one roof. He has 25 years of experience between retail, wholesale, and high-tech startups. As a matter of fact, he is on startup number 7. He has consulted and coached e-com and startup founders across 5 continents, helping them to launch, scale, and exit their business. I want to thank you, Oz, for coming and joining us today.
Thank you, Debbie. Appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, I'm going to dive right in because I think this is so important that people understand that you can scale and still maintain cash flow because it's hard, you know?
Yeah.
Um, how do you think Amazon sellers can identify new growth opportunities within their niche?
So if you're doing, say you have your own brand and you're looking to kind of grow, typically people on Amazon will start, they have one kind of idea, they've gone onto Amazon, they've looked at, okay, this is a potential market opportunity here. I know I could probably put my own little twist on this. Let me go see if I can get something sourced, made, kind of get my own kind of a patent on it and take it to market. So that's how, everybody kind of begins. And then it's like you're getting some traction. Great. How do I bring the next kind of probably variations, the next place to go is, okay, I did this size, can I do a smaller size? Then can I take that? Can I create a bundle out of it? Can I do color variations? So that all starts lending itself to becoming essentially a product line. Then from there, it's like, let me go explore. Ideally, if I'm reading kind of comments and I'm looking at the comments of and reviews of other products in my space, I'm starting to get a sense of the next type of problem that I could potentially solve for that kind of target customer
Yeah.
base. So let me go, take to market, maybe a small batch run, hopefully if you've if you've got Amazon and you're doing something off of Amazon like Shopify, so you've got direct access to some customers, you can say, okay, this is an idea I have, start getting some feedback from folks, maybe even do some pre-orders, and then launch essentially the next product.
Okay, I love the idea of looking at your competitors' reviews. I think far too often we neglect to really shop the competitor in e-commerce. I mean, I know that brick and mortar stores do this all the time, but it's really important. What strategies would you use on Amazon if you wanted to just increase product sales?
So increasing product sales, I mean, the quickest way is, just you're applying your PPC and strategies. But over time, it comes down to what are you looking to do long term. If you're really building out a brand, then that brand is much bigger than the channel of Amazon. And from that standpoint, it's like, okay, how am I building a following? How am I building a kind of a community, whether it's through social media, whether it's through blogs, YouTube. So I'm basically having kind of an audience that I'm solving a bigger problem than just what the product solves. I understand kind of this customer and their journey. So, for example, it could be kids and a product for toddlers. So if you understand that space, okay, what are the parents experiencing? How are they thinking about kids? What's the relationship to that particular object? What would they need next? From that kind of place, I can say I understand kind of the problems they're running into, and how do I basically come up with new products to solve it? How do I, maybe it's expanding into some informational products that can support it. Maybe it's going into doing partnerships that I can build kind of as part of my whole ecosystem, a set of offerings to this specific client or this customer base, because I understand that journey for, whether it's a small period of time, meaning like you've got toddlers, maybe it's a 3-year journey with the parents. But as they enter that phase with me, I know I can take care of them and they know they can trust me. So there's that kind of trust factor, there's credibility, and I can kind of go through them that journey. And hopefully during that time, they're sharing with other folks and getting a lot of word of mouth, a lot of referrals, people saying, go have this experience because it's more than just a product, it's a experience that you're delivering.
Yeah, growing that product line. Here is the question of the day. How does an Amazon seller expand the product line without impacting their cash flow?
Well, and a lot of that goes back to kind of relationships you have in place. So, typically a seller is going to go to the existing supplier and say, you know, this is what I'm thinking about next. What can you kind of give me that, you could potentially create that's similar to this kind of what I have in mind. Maybe it's totally different in that, and maybe the materials are different and that factory can't deliver it. They don't have the machinery to do it. I need to go find somebody else. But if you can go to your existing supplier, and if you, it goes back to kind of what's the relationship you have with the supplier. If you really thought of them as a partner, then you're basically forging this long-term relationship because they want to keep doing business with you, and oftentimes you can start getting in a position where you can start having terms, and that makes a huge difference to how you start scaling. Because if your supplier starts potentially bankrolling 30, 60, 90 days of a new product launch, that's huge, because that's where a lot of that big spike of cost is going to be, is that first 90 days. So if they can help kind of bankroll some of that, or at least even half of it, it can make a huge difference in getting the next product off the ground.
So, tell me, what role do you think marketing plays in the scaling of an Amazon business?
Marketing is, it doesn't matter if it's Amazon business or any business. It's a critical function for any business to scale. It's what's going to allow you to start developing an awareness. And assuming this is going back to you have to just find out what strategy you're doing on Amazon. If you're doing arbitrage, you're doing wholesale, then the brands themselves have kind of developed that demand for that product. But if it's something that you're creating, taking to market yourself, then it goes back to the fundamentals. Okay, how do I sit there and make sure I have like the optimal photography that positions my product in the best light possible, that maybe highlights a nuance that maybe my competitors aren't showcasing. How am I positioning my copy that makes it more attractive, and that's driving more folks to my listing. And then what am I doing off of platform? How much am I doing through social media, through influencers, through different videos, educational stuff, blogs, ebooks, anything that's basically supporting that journey with that the product line, as well as even the experience from a customer service standpoint. So, am I delivering a type of service and experience to whatever degree you could have, that's outside of Amazon, that you can kind of control, to say, what, this is somebody who I want to do business with.
Yeah. So we've talked a little bit about expanding the product line and marketing the play in that. How does Amazon seller actually help optimize their fulfillment strategy while they're scaling?
Fulfillment, I mean, look, most people are using FBA. So you're basically taking that responsibility off yourself. You're basically probably doing a lot of prep. So I still talk to a lot of sellers that once they've gotten to a point, they're getting stuff FBA ready straight from the factories, and it's going straight into FBA from there. So you can streamline a lot of that. But if you are having to touch it, then you want to make sure you're optimizing kind of your fulfillment process. Um, when you look at how layout of a fulfillment center or warehouse is set up, it's stuff coming in, stuff going out. And how do you minimize even the number of steps it takes? How many times you have to touch an item to get it in and get it out, so that you're minimizing the cost and you're increasing your throughput. So all those types of things make a difference. So, and folks that are doing FBA, oftentimes in Q4 they'll split up and they'll start doing an FBM strategy as well. And that's fine. You can have a hybrid strategy. Sometimes the products you may have had a FBA product, but your new product that you decide to launch, it's just not cost effective to go through FBA. So you're going to start fulfilling that yourself, or you're going to use a 3PL. And there's a lot of 3PL options out there. You have to think about kind of the products you have and where you have the 3PL. There's certain states where there's some value in operating out of that state versus a different state. Sometimes it's positioning, sometimes it's understanding the 3PL's understanding of the Amazon community, and they know how to send it to which fulfillment center, and if you're doing 3P versus 1P. So there's a lot of those factors that can come into, what's the optimal way to scale this up.
Yeah. Now let's say that they're in the middle of scaling and then just challenges come up. How do they overcome them? I mean, what is your advice to somebody when those come up?
From a fulfillment standpoint, is just the journey of
Just
Amazon challenges.
just the journey of Amazon, changing, constant change, and you're in the middle of scaling, things change and stuff. How do you overcome that?
I mean, that's when you start this journey with Amazon, it is a constant change. I mean, what was the recent thing I just saw that on reimbursements, it used to be 18 months. They just basically announced it's going to 60 days. That's a
Yeah,
huge change. So if you've been sitting on, okay, yeah, I've got, for next 4 months, 5 months, you know what? I'm getting too close to Q4. I'm going to tackle this in February, after January returns and stuff are over. Well, that's no longer a strategy anymore.
yeah,
So you have to change, you have the right personnel, you have the right relationships, are you using the right tools and technologies to make sure you're getting ahead of that so that you're not missing. I mean, that's money left on the table. Essentially,
yeah,
if you're smart about it, that could basically pay for some of your Q4 inventory. So you're
yeah.
part
There's
of it
some
is just
big
saying,
changes right now
yeah,
with the
or earlier this
FDA.
year with
Yeah,
the low storage fees and such. So part of it's just staying up to date with all the education, like all the changes that's coming up with. So if you're on top of that, then you can take action on it. And a lot of times you're getting stuff broadcasted from Amazon. This is happening, and sometimes it's not the easiest thing to understand. But luckily in this space, it's a great community that there's a lot of thought leaders in there that will basically kind of simplify. Look, Amazon said this out, this is really what this means. We had several people talk to and they asked questions back to the Amazon team, and they've kind of deciphered their code into this is what's meaningful, this is what's actionable, go do this.
yeah,
So it's good to have those type of people that you're following to say, okay, this is what I need to be doing because of the changes that are coming down the pipe.
yeah, yeah. And the other one that actually took effect today was the bullet points and the descriptions. So there's always things going on that have, I mean, if you have a large catalog, that could involve a lot of changes and it could upset your ranking, your product
Exactly.
ranking. Depending on, we're all kind of anxious to see how Amazon is really going to, start notifying people if they aren't adhering to these new standards and what's going to happen. But it is a constant. And I understand it completely because Amazon is trying to manage millions of separate entities or stores or businesses, and they have to have, some kind of restraints in place to do that. But um, tell me, we talked a little bit about the customer and scaling and stuff. You're talking to a group, finding out what do they think about some of your ideas if they want to do something new. How important is the customer experience once you get those new products on your Amazon business?
That's the key thing when it comes to products. People think that it stops there, that this is, I made a product, I put it on Amazon, now it's kind of my job's done. But at the end of the day, the key differentiator long term is always, especially if you're thinking about this as a brand as a whole, that's, beyond just this channel of Amazon, it's like, what is my brand experience? Then, customer journey, the customer experience is critical because
Yeah,
that's how I'll share an example. I'm getting some new shirts made. I went to Land's End site, and the experience I've had just talking to them and them just kind of walking through, kind of doing all the approvals for logo and stuff. Just the amount of service just to do like one or two shirts. It's crazy that they have that level of attention, but it's like,
mm,
the fact I'm talking about it now, it's word of
yeah,
mouth back to Land's End. It's the fact that that experience is what's being shared with other folks. Sometimes
yeah,
it's the product itself that gets shared, but oftentimes it's the experience or lack of experience. It's like um, I've had a couple of this year incidents on planes, and I'll tweet about this. It's like, this is 2024. they should be able to, airlines should be able to do better with all the
Yeah.
technologies that's available. Um, so, that's so the experience that was lacking or didn't meet expectations is getting shared 10 times more than the great experiences. So, how you're
Yeah.
defining what that brand experience should be is critical.
In some way, every customer now has become their own influencer because they have so many places that they can
Yes.
actually just get out information. Um, Now, inventory is so critical to the customer experience. Kind of tell me some of the strategies that you would use to prevent stockouts or overstocking, and particularly when you're scaling a business and maybe you don't know what the sales rate's going to be.
Yeah, it very much is a balancing act. It's funny in this space. I've always found it interesting that success is more costly than failure. Meaning, like, you can have a product launch, it fails. Okay, I invested, $5,000 in this set of products. It didn't work out as planned. I'm out $5,000. But if I'm successful, I need a lot more money to maintain that level of success, to get the next batch of inventory placed, to make sure I don't stock out. So all this money I spend on ad spend, I've ranked myself that my products to this level that if I'm out, I'm going to start getting dinged, and I just basically spend all that money for nothing. So it's like a little bit of success, and you need to. Especially with a new product launch, you have a very short window to make a decision. Meaning, like, okay, I get a little bit of traction the first 2 weeks. I need to start placing because of lead times. You know, Part of that goes into where is your production coming from. If
Yeah.
you're most folks are still operating out of China or somewhere in Southeast Asia, so you've got long lead times. So you need to factor in production time, time at sea, and getting in. So if you need a 60 to 90-day window, then you have a very short amount of window to say, okay, how can I quickly uh, assess and take a risk? Say, okay, I'm getting this kind of traction. I had this kind of hypothesis that if I could get this much inside the first 2 weeks, then that's my kind of indicator to take a bigger order and put that in place so that within 90 days, and I can adjust use my pricing, slow down some of the sales, but not stock out, and then make sure that I've got new inventory in.
Yeah, I think it's really important, Oz, to note that it requires a lot of homework. I mean, everything that you've been saying is, research your product and know these things, know your customer audience and stuff. It is not as simple as let's just put this up online, right?
Yeah.
And that's kind of what the feeling is for people who are just entering Amazon. They have that thought process that it's just you find something, you put it online, and then it just takes care of itself, and I'll have $10,000 a month in sales. And you know, it's important to understand, and especially if you're private label and you want to scale on Amazon, there are challenges and opportunities. What do you see as some of the challenges and opportunities for private labels?
So it's interesting you bring that up because one of the reasons for really launching ecomsellersHQ was solving an experience I had many months back where I met a private label seller. She decided, I want to get into this Amazon business and I want to start and basically take a product to market. She went on Alibaba, found a product, got a production made, got it into FBA, spent $14,000 on this. And after that, somebody introduced me to her, and we were just talking about her business and understanding it. So I was like, so how much are you, budgeting for ad spend? She's like, I need to advertise. I was like, well, this is your own product, so yes, I mean, you still got to get the ads to drive traffic to that listing. And she had no awareness of like Amazon buying and getting reviews and stuff. So in her mind, the whole business was just the production side, getting it into Amazon. No awareness that there's another whole half of that business.
Mm,
So in her mind, the whole business was half the business, really. It wasn't the whole business. So it made me realize, like, where is that disconnect where somebody doesn't get what the whole journey is like? Um, and especially when it comes to private label. And, you see so much on TikTok and Amazon that, hey, just you can go on here and make a lot of money. And I think last I heard, it's like something like 3,200 new sellers get on Amazon every day, and about 93% of
wow.
them are gone inside of 6 months.
Yeah.
because look, I mean, if people realize this is like legitimate, it's a real business, a real company. It's a lot of work, and
Yeah,
it's not an easy thing to do. And that's why I continue to buy Amazon stock because the house still wins. 3,200 people come on, they pay their fees, they have good products in there, and Amazon continues to win. But the
yeah,
sellers are like they come and go. So, there's a lot of those challenges where I think it's just an education and awareness thing. Okay, what is that full journey? What all is involved? What are all the resources that's needed to be successful? Amazing how many private label sellers I talk to that aren't familiar with dynamic pricing. They're not
mm,
familiar with like tools like Prophecy or Feedvisor and stuff that, oh, I can basically, I'm selling this for $29, but if I was using this technologies that can basically fluctuate my pricing, there's the demand for this that they could sell. I could be selling this for $33 and I'm leaving, $3 for this on the table every time.
yeah.
So,
Yeah, I
you know,
think there's too many messages out there today in this field from people that you can buy this educational course, this, four-step program, and somebody's going to teach you the success. But I think it's important to realize it's still a business and there is no instant success in business.
yeah,
It just doesn't happen. Whether you're on e-com or whether you've got some other kind of a business, as a business owner, you've really got to invest to researching, to, talking to experts, to, gaining that knowledge about the business that you're going in. So let's say that they are successful now. They're scaling their business, they've got some brand awareness, and now they're starting to hire employees. Tell us a little bit about what you think the importance of employee development and team building is.
great question. It goes back to how you're thinking about the brand once again. So there's a lot of people that will sell on Amazon. They're one person, or a couple, two-person operation. Maybe they have a couple of VAs. But if you're really thinking about, hey, am I building a brand here? No real brand is built by individuals. They're built by teams. So you need a team, and a good team is really thinking through. They're very proactive. They're basically thinking about what are the potential constraints now? What's the potential future constraints that we're going to be running into? Do we have the right infrastructure in place? How do we need to start scaling? I'm a big fan of traction or EOS, if you're familiar with that, and you start thinking about kind of the business. In fact, one of the things I'll typically do is when I'm in like events and stuff, and I'll ask the audience, how many of you consider yourself an entrepreneur? And, everybody hand goes up. Yep, I'm an entrepreneur. And then I'll ask is how many of you consider yourself a CEO? And like, two or three hands will go up. And then I'll ask them, which of those titles is in an org chart inside of a company?
Mhm.
And there is no entrepreneur in an org chart. There's
That's right.
CEO because that's a seat inside of a business. So and it starts getting people to start thinking, oh, is this a business or not? Because if it's a business, then there's different seats in that business. That there's a marketing function, there's a sales function, there's a sourcing, a production. Uh, it could be social media, but there's also the CEO thing that basically is executing and making sure people are doing the pieces they need to basically achieve what you want to with the business. So if you start thinking about it from that level that, okay, this is a business and who do I need to have and how well do I understand all the different roles that need to be fulfilled, um, and you're starting off, you're going to be sitting in a lot of those seats, but ideally what you're coming out of that is you hopefully you're defining kind of the SOPs for that particular function, so you can say, okay, well, this is the playbook. I need to bring somebody else that can take this, start here, and then figure out the next set of problems to solve in that particular role and help us kind of grow that business. Um, so, part of when you're that CEO role and you're thinking of that mindset, when you're hiring somebody, especially for somebody junior, you're thinking, okay, who's the future potential leaders that are kind of coming into the business,
Yeah.
and how do I mold them, nurture them, support them, coach them to basically, give them a career path, as well as get the most out of them. And a good cohesive team should give you an exponential output. It shouldn't be just a linear, meaning that they're basically able to make your business grow faster without things breaking.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when you start thinking about scaling, those are the types of things that you have to start thinking about too. Where is my best expertise. Who do I need? Like, I'm not a detailed person myself. So I always know if I'm hiring somebody underneath me, I want somebody who will drive me crazy with details
Yeah.
because I know that they will just see something that I do and they'll point something out to me. So I think it is important that you realize when you're starting to scale, if you're really going to be successful, you're going to add employees and you're going to add, not just product, but you're going to add to the business and the brand. And so it is important that you have these thoughts ahead of time.
I was gonna say the other thing to that is when you're on that journey as a CEO, the areas that you feel most comfortable in, that you feel like, okay, I know this piece, that's the stuff that's gonna be the hardest for you to let go. At some
Mm.
point, for you to really run the company, you're gonna have to let go of that and trust somebody else to do that, and hopefully guide them to do that as well as you, and hopefully even better. But I see so much of that. A company will only grow to the limitations of the founder CEO. You can never go scale past that.
Yeah.
So the more you can let go, the more you can say, okay, this is my function here as kind of as the CEO, not, I'm not going to own the books. I'm not the CFO. I'm not the CMO. I'm not these other roles. Even though I've been in those seats, I do that really well, but I know I need to let that go and trust somebody else to do it.
Yeah, I think some of the best times within our company and when we actually do once a month brainstorming. We just bring in a bunch of people from different departments and we just talk about
Mm.
challenges and opportunities and all of the other departments can see how they can aid and help in all of that. And all of a sudden now you really are team building because there's no silos. I feel
Correct.
comfortable. I can go into any department and say, hey, you know what? This is what I'm experiencing. Can you help me? Because we do this once a month and stuff. So you have to look at what are those things that you want to do that will build into the future. How do you think Amazon sellers can actually measure their success for scaling?
Measuring success, it's like with any business. I think, the metrics where it comes to success, it's pretty much same for all companies. Are you growing your sales? Are you hopefully improving your margins as you scale? If you're doing, from an inventory standpoint, are you increasing the number of turns you can have in a given year? Um, are you increasing the lifetime value of the customers? Are you creating, operational efficiency? Are you increasing your employee productivity? Are you defining the right kind of SOPs, and are you revisiting to make sure that it still holds true 12 months later? Does it need to be re-examined? Does it need to be streamlined further? And having the accountability that are people following that, so that you are getting that efficiency that you're hoping for? Um, QC, are you basically, have the right kind of measures and policies and kind of guidelines in place for quality control and making sure that, one of the challenges when you're scaling up is you're going to start talking to maybe different factories because over time you don't want to have dependency on one supplier. You want to start diversifying that just to kind of minimize some of that risk. But part of that challenge is, are you getting the same kind of quality consistency across, from one or batch of orders to the next? Or if people got this, 3 months ago and they want to reorder, are they going to get essentially the same kind of quality? If you look at McDonald's, one of the best things McDonald's ever did was, it's the McDonald's experience. You're going to go to basically a Big Mac, whether you get it in Jackson, Mississippi, or you get it in London, it's the same burger. They've somehow basically figured out the exact same recipe. It doesn't matter what part of the world you're in. It's going to taste the same. It's
Yeah,
going to have, so
and love
you,
them or hate them because a lot of people are like, I don't ever really ever eat there. But if you do eat there, you know what you're going to get
exactly.
because it's consistent and they've worked very hard, especially them being franchises, and they've worked really hard. Their SOPs must be so explicit
Um,
on how to make a Big Mac in order for that to be consistent throughout the globe. So yeah, that's a really good point. Now, Oz, I have been told that you are a really good person to talk to about cash flow. Okay. And
This is one of
so
my
I want to
passions.
be, yeah, before we end, I really want to get some expertise from you for some of the people who are out there saying, cash flow just is always a challenge for me. What do you think on Amazon the primary cash flow challenge is for sellers?
Probably the number one is just a lack of awareness and understanding. So first off, I would say is understanding what business you're in. Um, I talk to a lot of sellers, and they think I'm selling on Amazon is selling on Amazon, but the type of business, are you doing arbitrage, wholesale, private label? Each of those is meaning a different type of business. If you're doing arbitrage and you're doing wholesale, it's a cash flow business. It's not a growth business.
Yeah.
If you're looking at private label, it's a growth business. So based on that, will determine how you actually the strategies you should do to run that business. Meaning that if you have a cash flow business like a arbitrage or wholesale, money is cash flow, meaning that every month there should be money coming out of the business because there is no real exit event. You can't just go turn around that you're building equity that you can turn around and go sell this. Yeah, some people are selling wholesale businesses, but the multiples are much smaller. For the most part, is a cash flow business. So if you're not taking money off the table, you're going to basically do this. You basically bought yourself a job. 7 years later, you're going to find that
Yeah.
you're still doing the same thing. You have a bigger number that maybe you scale this up to a $20 million business, but there is nothing out of the at the end of this. So if you didn't take the cash out, you just basically bought yourself a job for 7 years. You
Yeah.
flip it around on the growth business, like a private label, where you actually have your equity essentially you're building. You've got patents and stuff. You've got a really intellectual property that's of some value that you can turn around and sell this to. Then it makes sense. Okay, yes, I need to take some of that money. Still probably take some of that out because at the end of the day, you really still should be taking a percentage out of what I call your sleep well number. So that part of the challenge is if you're doing stuff on Amazon, you're going to run into times where your listing gets suspended, your accounts get suspended. You're going to need to bring in some of the lawyers and stuff. You need to have a cash reserve. And when I ask this folks like different events and stuff, the average person has about enough cash flow, like a reserve set aside for about 30 to 45 days, meaning that if their sales come to a grinding halt
Yeah.
and they're stopped for more than 45 days, they basically may be completely gone out of business. And if you're doing wholesale arbitrage, then you need about have about three month reserves just because the returns are faster. If you're doing private label, you need to have about a 6 month reserve.
Yeah.
So you need to have that money set aside, but then be reinvesting it back into growth because you actually have a growth business. And that's how you need to be thinking about it.
Are there forecasting tools out there that sellers could actually use that will help them predict maybe their cash flow?
Very few. I mean, that's part of the challenge is, Viably has some aspect of a forecasting capability. My Figures has an interesting forecasting capability as well, and they're doing a little bit more because they're almost replacing your QuickBooks in the process. Um, but other than that, there's a lot on forecasting for inventory, but not for the whole business holistically. And that's
Mm.
what you really want is to, you know, Amazon's part of the business, but that doesn't cover all your OpEx, your operating expenses. And that's not factoring in, excuse me, your rent, your salaries, consulting fees, your taxes, your utilities, insurance. You really want all of that to be tracked as well because that's how you're running the business. And usually that operating expenses sits about 15%. So you need to be able to track that and say, okay, well, am I over 15%? Am I not efficient enough? Or am I, at 12%? Great. It's a good
Mm.
position to be in.
Yeah. Now, fourth quarter is drawing closer. And so we know that sellers are going to have seasonal fluctuations and stuff like that. Tell us a little bit about how they can effectively manage their cash flow through these seasonal fluctuations.
So if you have a product line that you're doing just seasonal, first off, that becomes its own set of challenges. So I know some folks that, they're really focused on toys and that's Q4 heavy, or they're doing stuff like beach towels and stuff. So it's very summer heavy. Um, some of those, like the beach one, I know or like grills and stuff. I've met some sellers that their strategy was to expand into Australian market. So now they picked up the winter season here, summer season there Just keep in
Mhm.
mind, Amazon that is not that big down in Australia. eBay is the number one market down there, so you got to get
Yeah.
really comfortable with the eBay space. Um, so if you're looking at this, one is just how you're kind of running your numbers so that you have make sure you got cash flow in a good spot so that you can take care of your Q4 needs. If you're doing wholesale, I know people buy in Q1 because they're buying stuff at discounted prices. They're going to hold until Q4. So you just need to make sure the math makes sense for you to hold those goods until then. If you're focusing on brands, ideally it's great if you can diversify some of your
Yeah.
brands and your product line to just say, okay, well, I've got stuff that's going to be very Q4 heavy, but then I've launched another line that allows me to sell throughout the rest of the year as well.
Yeah.
So just alleviate some of the lumpiness of those sales cycles.
What are your thoughts about lines of credit?
If you can get them, great. Look, at the end of the day, when it comes to e-commerce, it's very hard. You can't go to any traditional bank because traditional banks don't know how to underwrite uh, online businesses. So that's why there's a whole barrage of different kind of funding sources that exist out there for e-commerce because they're doing revenue-based financing or they're doing inventory-based financing. They just have a different models around how they underwrite the business. So, and in that there are some kind of line of credit folks, but understanding capital is really key. Meaning that everybody wants money. They're like, hey, I just started a business, I want money. You don't want money in the early days because what that's fueling is your mistakes. You want to figure out essentially your machine, what I call the machine of your system and how you're generating profits. Once you have that built, then the capital becomes fuel to kind of operate that machine, and it's not fueling your mistakes because there's no ROI in fueling mistakes. That
Yeah.
money will be spent and you didn't get anything for it. But if you figured out that, okay, I've got this machine in place that I can crank out 10% returns net. So for every $100,000 I sell, I can make $10,000. Now, if I bring in outside capital, I can basically start fueling that machine. Yeah, fine. I may adjust that from 10% down to maybe a net of 8 or 9%, but I can scale much faster because of that. And
Yeah,
now the math makes sense.
I remember when I was getting ready to run my first business, I had a mentor who told me that don't go to the finance sources first, go to your accounts receivable. If you're overextended, then you need to go to the people who owe you money first,
Exactly.
you know, and get that before you start. Otherwise, like you said, you're living in that mistake. First of all, collectibles, if you don't get them early, you may not get them at all. But, so I just thought that was such a fascinating thing. If
Yeah.
you had anything that you could say just to close out this session, Oz, really about um, scaling Amazon businesses while maintaining cash flow, what would be your number one tip for us?
The number one tip I would say, which I probably tell everybody, is take chips off the table. I just see so many people that first is kind of knowing your numbers enough to know that okay, run a profitable business, but take some of that profit out for you. It's hard to really kind of keep waking up and keep doing this over and over again, versus to say do that and then look, you have this one account that you look at, like, oh, okay, look, this is really going somewhere. I'm actually getting a pool of money here. Now, that doesn't mean you just sit there and have it sitting there in the bank, because you can actually do that and be intelligent about it. I can take this and say, you know what, as I'm scaling up, I need to get warehousing, but don't go rent a warehouse. Take that money, and the company can go buy or fire up a second company, let that company buy that warehouse, and then rent that back out to your other business. So one of the things I typically will teach around is how to get into kind of portfolio thinking. So if you think
Mm,
of this as a portfolio, and then what are your different asset classes? Right now it's your stream of revenue, maybe it's Amazon, and maybe that's one channel. You have multiple channels, but that's all your e-commerce revenue. How do you then take some of that money, which is riskier money, and start saying, okay, let me start adding in other asset classes. Maybe it's taking some of that money and getting into real estate. Maybe I'm buying the warehouse. That's going to give me lower return, but it's more conservative, but it's more stable, so less risky. How do I take risky
yeah.
money and move it into less risky money? And then I'm adding new asset classes, and start thinking of this as my portfolio for the business.
And thus the reason why you are on your seventh startup,
There you go.
because
It's
of
a
the way that
fundamentals.
you think. Yeah. Oz, thank you so much for joining us today. I want to thank everyone else who's joining us today for Ecom Insiders. This is sponsored by SPCTEK. Our guest today, Oz Merchant. And if they wanted to find you, Oz, what's the website?
ecomsellersHQ.com.
One M or two M on ecom?
One MECOM sellers with an S dot HQ.com.
Okay, so there you go. If you have more questions for him or you're looking to scale and stuff, go find Oz. If you have any questions for us, please leave them below in the comment fields. And if you enjoyed today's session, please subscribe and enjoy our future editions of Ecom Insider. Thank you.
Thank you, Debbie.